At 05:17 hours on September 25th, 6 Ukrainian Beaver drones burst out of Kherson and pointed their noses at Kacha airfield in Crimea, where 2 AN-26 aircraft sat waiting to become the next bonfire. The route ran through a known radar gap, so it felt quiet, right up until it absolutely didn't.
Unknown to the Ukrainians, the Russians had parked a Tor-M2 air defense system right in the middle of that gap. The battery radar locked onto all 6 drones at 12 kilometers. The lead Beaver's warning gear screamed that special tone that says, "You're about to have a really bad day."
A Russian missile was already airborne, hauling to 3 times the speed of sound. The 9 M331 would arrive in 18 seconds with enough explosive to turn a drone into confetti across a 16-meter sphere. The operator did the only move left, drove for the deck so hard the composite frame creaked like a wooden ship in a storm. 3 meters above the Black Sea, close enough to taste the salt spray, the Beaver leveled out while the missile tried to follow. Missiles built in the 1990s were meant to tag fighter jets up high, not composite birds skimming waves. The missile yanked so many G's in the turn that friction started cooking its control surfaces. When you're doing 850 meters per second and you kiss the water, it doesn't matter if you're a missile or a brick, you're done. The blast threw water 40 feet up, and shrapnel caught the second Beaver like buckshot, turning its right wing into an afterthought and dumping it into the sea. The 5 survivors scattered like pool balls after a break, each peeling off in a different direction, while the Tor operator tried to pick his next shot. His computer could track 48 targets and engage 4 at once, but it was coded by folks who assumed aircraft fly nice, polite, straight lines.
One drone turned back toward Ukraine and climbed steep, showing its full wingspan and belly to radar instead of just its nose. On scope, its return jumped from a tiny dot to something 3 times bigger, like turning a knife blade sideways instead of edge on. The straight-up climb also created a strong Doppler shift. Older Soviet-style logic reads as a high-priority threat, so the system tagged it as the main problem. Bigger return plus vertical movement meant climbing fighter or incoming missile, at least in the programmer's world. 2 missiles chased that decoy back home, while 4 real threats dropped to wave height and booked it for the Black Sea.
By the time the Tor operator realized he'd been played, the drones had slipped inside his minimum range, where missiles can't arm warheads fast enough. It's like trying to punch somebody who's hugging you. His warning to the next line came out pure panic, like explaining to your boss how 4 toy planes just clowned multi-million-buck hardware. That call reached a Raptor patrol boat that had been hiding behind a derelict gas platform since midnight, engines cold, waiting for exactly this mess. The same warning hit the Black Sea Fleet Battle Watch Center at 5:28. The dispatcher checked the patrol chart and smirked.
Russian naval intel had figured Ukrainian drones like to cross between 5:30 and 6 a.m., right when the watch changes and everyone's thinking about breakfast, not threats. The platform, abandoned since 2014 when Russia grabbed Crimea, stood on rusted legs 30 meters above the water. Perfect cover for a boat playing hide-and-seek with million-dollar stakes. It sat exactly 18 kilometers from the Ukrainian coast, just outside Ukrainian coastal artillery range, but close enough to intercept anything headed for Crimea. Water depth was 45 meters, shallow enough to anchor if needed, deep enough to maneuver at speed. Up on the bow sat the Uprava Cord remote weapons station. That isn't your basic machine gun. It's gyro-stabilized with its own ballistic computer, able to track targets while the boat bucks like a mechanical bull. The KPVT heavy machine gun is worked by a gunner below deck on a screen protected from return fire. The 4 Beavers hit the Black Sea at 0531. Back in Kherson, their operators flew blind on GPS waypoints, with video feeds showing nothing but dark water and static. 8 kilometers ahead, the Raptor's thermal imager watched them come in. The gas engines ran at 200 degrees Celsius, while the ocean sat at 15 degrees Celsius. So on thermal, they glowed like cigarettes in a dark room. The system could hold that heat signature at 3 kilometers, even through sea spray. Then the ambush opened. 14.5 millimeter rounds ripping out of nowhere. Not normal bullets, each thumb-sized slug could punch through an inch of steel armor or zip through a car lengthwise. The fire control computer crunched the shot. 150 kilometer per hour target, 1,800 meters out, 3-meter crosswind. Except this quarterback was steel, slinging copper-jacketed hate and discontent. The lead Beaver ate 6 hits in 2 seconds, rounds punching through composite like hot needles through butter. What saved it was dumb luck by design. The drone was basically a flying empty box, electronics tucked in corners and explosives in the nose. The rounds zipped through without hitting anything vital. The operator yanked back, climbing straight up as sparks spit from damaged servo wiring, and a smoke trail showed on thermal like the world's most dangerous skywriting. At 100 meters, geometry became the drone's best friend, rock band trying to hear a whisper. The Beavers lost contact with their operators. But jamming is a headache when the other side already hung up. Once signal dropped, they flipped to pre-programmed waypoints in memory. Those waypoints were dead simple. Hit these GPS coordinates in order, hold this altitude, then dive in the target zone. No fancy evasion, point A to point B like a very deadly pizza delivery. They split 3 ways. 1 climbed to 200 meters, 1 stayed at 50 in the helo's sweet spot, and 2 dove toward the waves inside the Ka-52's rotor wash chaos. The pilot Russian-friendly fire is common enough to be basically expected. So he pulled up, turned north, and left 4 battered but flying Beavers to cross into Crimean airspace at 5:45. He figured coastal defenses would handle it. Smart money would have been on that, right? The instant the 4 Beavers crossed the coastline, 2 radar stations hit them with enough electromagnetic energy to cook popcorn at 30 kilometers. MR-10M1 coastal surveillance radar and a mobile Podlet-K1 fed targeting data to the Pantsir systems at Kacha airfield, and the whole setup started lighting up like Times Square. Here's the irony that'll make you eat crow. After the September 21st hit came from the north, the Russians had swung all their Pantsirs to face north. Turning those mounts to engage from the south takes 30 seconds. In modern combat, that's the gap between a clean intercept and becoming the next YouTube clip. The lead Beaver climbed toward the MR-10M1, riding the radar's own emissions like breadcrumbs. Knowing he'd been outmaneuvered by aircraft more agile than Russia's best patrol craft. His report triggered an immediate response from a Ka-52 already on patrol, the pilot banking hard to the intercept point. The Ka-52 had been vectored from 30 kilometers east, circling 2 hours and burning 500 liters per hour over empty water. It only had 40 minutes of fuel left, enough for 1 engagement before it had to RTB. Its coaxial rotors spin opposite directions on the same shaft, killing torque so it doesn't need a tail rotor. Without that tail rotor eating 15% of power, you get more juice for weapons and speed, and this helo. The Raptor's gun could elevate to 60 degrees, but the drones were nearly overhead at 85. The gunner could see it and track it, but couldn't point the weapon at it. Like trying to swat a fly on the ceiling while you're stuck in a chair. The boat lit off its engines, 0 to 48 knots in 12 seconds. At that speed, it didn't so much sail as bounce across the waves like a stone skipping water. The gunner fought for aim, but it's brutal when your platform goes airborne every 3 seconds. And the stabilizer was never meant for a boat temporarily identifying as an aircraft. 3 undamaged Beavers split around the patrol boat, 2 left and 1 right, forcing a choice. The boat tried to turn at 48 knots, but physics doesn't care about your feelings. The radius stretched to 300 meters. Anything sharper would flip the boat faster than you can say, design limitation. The captain watched the drones vanish toward Crimea. The radar was basically yelling, "Here I am," at 200 kilowatts. The crew watched it close at 150 kilometers per hour, helpless, like a security camera watching a break-in while you're stuck out of town. A nearby Pantsir launched a 57 E6 that went from 0 to Mach 2 in 3 seconds. But the Beaver had already crossed inside minimum range, where arming logic won't let the warhead go live. The missile self-destructed overhead, harmless, adding $90,000 to Russia's tab for the day. The second Beaver came in on the Podlet-K1, using terrain as a shield. Ground bounce created ghost returns, and the Pantsir computer saw 3 targets at different altitudes when only 1 was real. It stirred up, needed every bit of it. The Arbalest-52 radar locked onto all 4 Beavers at 8 kilometers. The pilot picked a Vikhr missile, built to turn tanks into modern art, now pressed into a job it wasn't born for. Like using a sledgehammer to swat a mosquito. Sure, it works if you connect, but connecting is the hard part. Vikhr has no seeker. It rides a laser beam like a train on tracks. The helicopter paints the target with a coated laser, and the missile's tail sensor looks backward at the helo, keeping itself centered in the beam. It's follow the leader at Mach 2, with leader moving, target moving, and the missile doing geometry while pulling 20 Gs. The shot missed by 3 meters. Any tank would have set off the proximity fuse. Tanks reflect radar like billboards, but the Beaver reflected like a business card, so the fuse never accepted it as valid. Next, the Ka-52's EW suite kicked on, blasting radio static across the frequencies drones use to phone home. That 100-watt output was like standing next to a hornet's nest with cleats inside the operator's brain. Manual pick, under pressure, with seconds to spare. By the time he chose, the drone was already diving. At 6 a.m., the first Beaver slammed the MR-10 M1 antenna at 200 kilometers per hour. A 5-kilogram shape charge turned into a molten copper jet, moving faster than a rifle bullet, 8 times faster, and punched through like the structure was paper. 8 seconds later, the second Beaver hit the Podlet-K1 antenna. The blast looked like a sunrise in the wrong direction. Orange flash, black smoke, and the sound of several million bucks turning into scrap. Rolled into a diving turn hard enough to pin him with 3 times body weight, trying to line up the 30mm cannon. But helicopter guns are a pain in the ass. The whole helo has to point at what you're shooting, like aiming an 8-ton rifle that's also flying. The 2A-42 had another issue. Bore-sighted to 1,500 meters. Up close, rounds pass low because the sight assumes you're farther out, like trying to hit something 10 feet away with a scope zeroed for 100 yards. The cannon walked fountains across the water, but hitting a crossing target while diving at 280 kilometers per hour is pure math, and math doesn't cut you slack. One low drone got caught in the rotor wash, like standing behind a jet engine, except it's above you, blasting straight down. Then the Ka-52 warning system lit up. He was 10 kilometers from the coast, inside Pantsir engagement range at Kacha airfield. Friendly transponder or not, The third Beaver, shot up and barely flying but still game, lined up Kacha airfield, where AN-26, tail number Blue 30, sat parked like a gift-wrapped present labeled, "Please blow me up." The fourth Beaver circled wide from the west, while Pantsirs were still trying to rotate. Zero diplomacy, zero courtesy, just coming in hot from an angle the defenses weren't ready for. The damaged third drone began its final dive at 6:01, struck the first AN-26, and the fourth and final drone hit the second. The blast crushed everything within 50 meters with raw pressure before fire even arrived. The fireball climbed 40 meters high and hit 2,000 degrees, hot enough to melt aluminum, and both AN-26s demonstrated that by becoming puddles you could see on satellite the next day. For the fourth time in a week, Ukraine hit the same airbase, proving Russian air defenses work like arcade claw machines. The prize always slips out at the last second.